According to the World Bank's newest commodity markets outlook study, the Russian-Ukraine war has caused a massive shock to commodity markets, disrupting global patterns of trade, production, and consumption, which might keep prices at historically high levels through the end of 2024. The highest price rises since 2008 have been for foodstuffs, of which Russia and Ukraine are significant producers, and fertilizers, which rely on natural gas as a production input. Energy costs have also been soaring and could peak at more than 50% at the end of 2022 before reducing in 2023 and 2024, according to analysis. Non-energy costs, such as agriculture and metals, are expected to rise over 20% in 2022 and then moderate in the years after. Despite these, commodity prices are likely to stay much higher than the 5-year average. Prices might be much higher and more unpredictable than currently forecast in the case of a lengthy war or increased sanctions against Russia, according to the same analysis. Brent crude oil is predicted to average $100 per barrel in 2022, the highest level since 2013, and a 40% rise over 2021. Prices are predicted to also decrease to $92 per barrel in 2023, which is still significantly above the 5-year average of $60. These statistics inform our topic for discussion today, which borders on the report put forward by the World Bank, intimating that food and energy crisis might last till the year 2024. This is Business Edge. I am Lekon Onobanjo, standing in for Tolulope Adeleru Balogun. Joining me from Abuja, Nigeria, is Mukhtar Mohammed, financial analyst and CEO, Asha Dynamic Solutions, and he will be joining me as we unpack today's discussion, which borders on the report by the World Bank. Now, let's move over to Mukhtar this morning. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Lekon. My pleasure being on your show.
So let's start. Now, as the Russian war in Ukraine enters the second month, one of the consequences is the hike in prices of food and energy globally. Now, tell us, how have African countries actually coped with this so far?
Well, we've not really coped. According to the World Bank, again, the level of poverty in Africa is expected to increase. So we've not really coped because we've not gotten those palliative, especially from our own government, not the type of palliative we are waiting for the war to come and give to Africa then, and we're giving it to African governors. We are talking about the governors taking steps to, maybe subdue the suffering of the people. But we've not really gotten that like most developed economy has done in the world. So Africa has really had heat, so we have simply not been able to cope, and I don't see us coping anytime soon. Remember, because we're coming out of the pandemic, we're trying to settle down over the pandemic. The economy was opening up, and then the Russian-Ukraine crisis came in, and now the challenge with the Russian-Ukraine crisis is now a global challenge, especially to the European nations and also Africa in the area of food production and gas.
So invariably, Mukhtar, are you saying that African countries are not ready and might not be able to cope with the crisis if it lingers into 2024?
Definitely. If you listen to the president of the African Development Bank, you understand what we are saying. He also trying to come up with a package to help Africa. If this continues to be very difficult for any African country to survive it, because it's really going to affect the economy, especially the agricultural sector. And in Africa, we have minimum means of transportation, and almost all the transportation depend mostly on gas. So when the cost of gas goes up, then the cost of production goes up. Now, once the cost of production goes up, the cost of goods and services goes up, and it's not looking like it's something that will subside anytime soon.
Okay, Mukhtar, looking at the other hand now, the high cost of commodities, which many African countries rather are majorly exporting, ideally should bring about a windfall for these nations. But then, would you say that African countries are earning more from sales of gas and other commodities since the outbreak of the war is something that is feasible? Do you think they are working towards it?
Well, unfortunately, what Africans gain in one hand, they lose in the other hand. And let me use my country, Nigeria, as an example. We are Angola, who seems to be the largest producer of coal in Africa. And when you look at that, our own challenge, especially in Nigeria, is that we have the crude, but we lack the refined petroleum product. So what we gain one end, we tend to lose it in the other end, I think so. So we have to import refined petroleum product at the international price, which also now will not affect our economy. So definitely, I think as an African nation, we don't see any time soon that will benefit from it.
Now, about 35 countries have placed restrictions on food exports. So in times like this, do restrictions actually work, and will it not be counterproductive by putting further pressure on vulnerable countries?
Definitely, restriction does not work, especially even most African countries have not been able to provide for themselves, for their people. They still depend on importation of some of these raw materials into sometimes not even the raw materials. They already made refined food also. So it's a big challenge. It's a big challenge. So in the fact that the world also has become a global village, you can't say you are on an island of yourself. You'll be able to cope with whatever the other country is bringing in.
All right, now, so the president of the African Development Bank, that is Akinwumi Adesina, also echoed what the World Bank said. It said that Africans should prepare for the inevitability of food crisis. Now, what does it mean when you say prepare? How do you think they should prepare? And of course, when you look at this sort of preparation, don't you think it would disrupt the events and the plans that they have actually put on course? Looking at the crisis between Russia and Ukraine.
When you say Africans should prepare, that means it's trying to make Africans look. You need to be taking steps to avoid a chronic food crisis, because there's definitely going to be a food crisis. What we should try to do is to avoid a long-lasting food crisis that might not be good for the economy of Africa. So preparation, how do we prepare? Then we need to get the government in there. The government have to come out with handouts for farmers. And then when we talk about handout of farmers, you're talking about fertilizer. And most African countries also depend on the importation of fertilizer products. So it's looking very, very dicey for African countries. But it is what it is at the moment, because it's not just an African crisis. I keep saying it, even the developed economies in the world, especially look at the United States, for the first time they are doing double-digit inflation. So it has becoming a global challenge.
Of course, it's a global challenge, Mukhtar, but then you would understand that subsidy on fertilizer and distribution of fertilizer is something that governments in Africa have been doing over time. Don't you think there are other things they should be doing differently? Because, of course, you said it's a global crisis. Africa is not exonerated. Do you think there should be some other critical steps that should be taken apart from these ones that you've actually mentioned?
Definitely. Critical. I like the word you're using, critical steps they should be taken. One of the critical steps they should be taking is cost of funding, cost of fund for African farmers. Then the Land Use Act for most African countries were the same act that were done by the colonial masters. So they are supposed to be looking at that act and begin to look at how they can use those acts to revive those Land Use Act to modern terms, so that with that you'll be able to give African farmers can use their land as collateral to get funding and also be able to expand their production. So definitely that's one major change that they have to do. Cost of funding. Then they have to come and revive the Land Use Act of most African countries. It's still archaic. So they need to do that also, and they need to provide infrastructure. And when you talk about infrastructure, we're not just talking about road networks to the farm. We're talking about storage facilities, because it's storage facility that gives room for what you can store and be able to export to other African countries. So when you look at that, I think we have those are the things that I think they should do rather than just giving subsidies for fertilizer. It's just trying to address the mind. Like I told somebody, African government should stop acting they should stop acting like ticket agents that tells you this is the this is how much for ticket, you can go to this place, but they've never been there. So they should start acting as tour agents. The tour agent will always know where to take the tourists to, how to help the tourists develop. And so, but African government, I say they sometimes behave more like ticket agents.
All right, Mukhtar, you get to stay with us for a while. I'll be back with you. Now, let me tell you that commodity markets are experiencing one of the largest supply shocks in decades because of the war in Ukraine. The resulting increase in food and energy prices has taken a significant human and economic toll, something the World Bank hinted might continue till the year 2024. Now, on the other side of this break, we get to find out how low to middle income countries that feel the heat more can deal with the crisis. We'll be back in a bit. Do stay with us. Still with me on the program is Mukhtar Mohammed, financial analyst and CEO, Asha Dynamic Solutions, as we continue to unpack the realities regarding World Bank's revelation of a possible lingering of food and energy crisis down till the year 2024. So back to you, Mukhtar. Before the impasse between Russia and Ukraine, there have been pressures on energy prices, mostly due to COVID-19 lockdowns and trade disruptions. Of course, Russia seems unwilling to bend. Now tell us, how dire are things likely to get, and do you think anything can be done to bring to an end the crisis between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, I think the crisis between Russia and Ukraine, there's a lot of ego involved in it. So when ego comes to be involved in a situation, then it's apparently very difficult for anybody to be able to have a solution to it, because Russia is thinking that we should have just overrun Ukraine, but Ukraine is not being overrun because of the support they are getting from the Western nation. And so they don't want to just back down to see that it will mean that it was a senseless law, and it could also affect the rating of Vladimir Putin. And I don't think he wants to do that. That is about why I don't think that the war is anytime soon will come to an end. But for African nations, I think it's time for us, because what we're seeing is that the European nations, the Americans are looking more on how they can help themselves, and those economies that depend solely on them. They're looking at how they can help themselves, and the economy that depends solely on them than how they want to help African, rather how they want to help African nations. It's all a different ballgame they're trying to do.
Well, currently, Russia is actually demanding payment for its gas and ruble against the commonly used US dollar, a move the European Union is resisting. Incidentally, Egypt has also informed shippers passing its ports to pay in Egyptian pounds only. Now, could this be a means of increasing the value of other legal tenders against the American greenback?
Yes, Yes, it is. It is, but it's not something. American greenback has become a global currency. So even if Russia is saying that, we saw that they are saying that they are going to be implementing that on against unfriendly nations. So they need to explain to us those unfriendly nations. So then other countries that are friendly nations will still be paying them in the American dollar. So the unfriendly nation, how large are these unfriendly nation in terms of how much of Russian gas do they really need? So definitely, Russia is trying to make sure that they have a fight to bring down the value of the American greenback. But unfortunately, it's a global currency, and also most of Russia's own reserve also is even stored in the American dollar, which has been frozen. So it's economic decision that, as it stands, will not stand the test of time.
Well, in all of these, Mukhtar, you will agree with me that African countries seem to be in a disadvantaged position because most of them actually import refined petroleum products, of which the prices have skyrocketed. As at this particular time, it's been that the subsidies are bad for the economy. How do middle to low income countries deal with this energy crisis so as to mitigate the adverse effects on their citizenry?
I think this is where the African trade and investment that was supposed to happen within African countries would have been of advantage, because we would have seen more trade within African countries, knowing that two of the countries in Africa are among the 6 largest producers of crude. So that could have helped imitate the suffering. Like what we say is that in terms of infrastructure, that's a major challenge, and also refined petroleum products are not done by most in these African countries that are even among the 6 largest producers of crude. So the challenge is that Africans we should have used this as a springboard to begin to see how they can do trade within themselves. But unfortunately, that cannot happen overnight. So the African countries would definitely be the one to suffer. And because, again, like I said, the developed economy are still looking at their own interests here, because the crisis is a global crisis. It's also affecting their own people. So they are thinking of how to put solutions for their own people. And that is why in the United States, some states have cut off their gas tax. Most of when you buy that gas now, you don't pay the gas tax. That is a means of reducing the pressure, the earning capability of using the pressure on their people. But Africans cannot do that because most of them does not even have the infrastructure, and most of them still need this revenue to grow their economy. So it's a big challenge.
That's a big challenge. So if you are to proffer solutions now, what are those things you would say African countries should do to increase the capacity? You mentioned infrastructure. You talked about revenue generation. So how can they go about this to ensure that they have capacities in all these areas if they are to mitigate the impact of the crisis and, of course, insulate themselves and, of course, the economy?
Yes, there's a saying that the crisis time is opportunity times to begin to look inward and drive your economy. If you look at countries like Indonesia, you look at countries like Singapore, even China, it was during the time of crisis they liberated themselves from global shocks like this. But those things are not things that you happen overnight. It's not something that is not rocket science, though, but it's not something that can be done overnight because they need to have the structure in place to be able to begin to do that. And structures are not fixed overnight. So there's no African. The only thing I can say is that African has seen an opportunity to look inward, especially the African Continental Trade Agreement. This is the time that Africa is supposed to be benefiting from such an agreement. So we need to look at the agreement critically and begin to say, how can we benefit? Look, Ghana may not have the kind of crude they have, but they are also now producing crude. You have Angola, you have even in very close to Nigeria, here in Niger. They have all. So what we begin to look, how can we build infrastructure from Nigeria pumping their crude to Benin without going through the border through smuggling? How can we build infrastructure to have our crude being pumped from here to other African countries, or if not African countries, West African countries? Those are things that should be done. But like I said, it's not things that could be addressed within the next shortest possible time. So it's a big challenge, but it could be an opportunity for us to begin to build that commando in terms of trading within ourselves, also that broadly in terms of trying to bring down tariffs that have to do with trade within ourselves. So that will attract major players that can maybe you see a major player knows that, oh, Nigeria have our situation problem. But if I establish my company in Benin or I establish my company in Ghana, they can still be providing something for the Nigerian market here. And that will bring the cost of that product down. And that also brings tariff down. And that will also mean that a lot of Nigerians or a lot of Africans will be able to afford those products. So we need it has to be a win-win situation. The only main reason why the African Continental Trade Agreement has not worked is because most African countries will see their own country as a dumping ground for those products, especially when they have the numbers like Nigeria, because we don't have the infrastructure to develop those products to goods and services.
So let me ask Mukhtar, can the ever-rising price of commodities fuel demands for higher wages as being experienced currently in South Africa? Now, could this also spread to other countries?
High what?
That is high wages now, talking about inflation and the prices of commodities. Do you think it will fuel higher wages being demanded for by South African workers?
Definitely. Because it's supposed to, but again, when you are beginning to look at high wages, if you put in those high wages, then you need to begin to deal with inflation. That's a monster. And the inflation monster is a monster that has a snowball effect in every aspect of the economy. It is not dealt with. So it's not about giving up the high wages. Like I said, we need to begin to look at palliative for our people in terms of taxes, in terms of giving them palliative, in terms of transportation. But if you use my country, Nigeria, as an example, you've seen that those things have not worked because of one thing, corruption. And corruption is caused because there's no structure. They cannot be structured without data. So you see that there is a major foundational challenge that needs to be addressed before you can begin to address some of this issue holistically. But increments in wages is not the solution to it. It's going to cause inflation. What the people want to see is how can you reduce goods and services so that whatever they earn now, they will be able to afford what they used to afford before.
Well said, Mukhtar. Thank you so much for joining us on Business Edge.
My pleasure.
The World Bank has hinted that things could get worse between Russia and Ukraine if the crisis persists. So we are left with only two options. One, it's either global institutions pull strings together to quickly put an end to the war, or two, every country goes into its tent to fashion out plans to insulate itself or probably mitigate the possible impact of the predicted crisis. So we quickly go on a break now. When we return, it will be time for NC4 to watch. Don't go away. Welcome to NC4 to watch. Let's take you through the four developing stories in the business world. And we start by telling you that investors and businesses are staring at billions of shillings in losses following the unprecedented 5-day long holiday that starts from Friday to Tuesday in Kenya. The 5-day weekend comes after the government declared Tuesday a public holiday to mark Eid al-Fitr in addition to Monday's Labor Day rest. The government had also declared Friday a national day holiday following the death of President Umar Kibaki. Still in Kenya, the International Monetary Fund has backed Kenya's recent taxation of essential goods and services like cooking gas and bank loan fees, arguing that additional cash raised has helped in cushioning the higher cost of fuel and fertilizer in the wake of the Ukraine war. The IMF says in the latest review of Kenya's economy that important tax policy measures have resulted in strong tax collections this financial year ending June. Away from that, the global economic crisis triggered by the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 and Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February this year has intensified the risk of declining trade integration between countries. a process referred to as deglobalization of trade. This trend risks adding additional strain to economies in Africa, even with the current economic pain from soaring food and fuel price inflation caused by the war in Ukraine. And finally, Nigerians may begin to enjoy 5G services soon as MTN Nigeria plans to launch a technology very, very soon. Now, according to the Chief Executive Officer, MTN Nigeria, Carl Toriola, 5G services may go live with the nation as early as the second half of the year 2022, that's this year, as the company is ready to do so. And that is the end of Business Edge for today. Don't forget that you can follow us on social media. We are at News Central TV. You can download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store. And you can also visit our website, www.newscentral.africa. Until next time, I am Lekon Onabanjo.